Welcome to the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology podcast. I'm Gideon Barr, the Executive Director of the Encyclopedia of Catholic Theology. I'm joined today by Dr. Christopher Kaczor, Professor of Philosophy at Loyola Marymount University. Dr. Kaczor, thank you for coming to Cape Girardeau.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. You've turned in a really excellent article for the Encyclopedia on moral systems, comparing duty-based ethics, consequentialist ethics, sort of nihilism and moral relativism with Aquinas's virtue ethics all throughout. And it's a very fine article that I think seminarians and students will benefit greatly from.
Thank you.
What we want to do today is just talk a little bit about you as a person, your background, how you came to be where you are today. So where did you grow up? What are some of your early experiences of the faith? Did you grow up Catholic or not? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually began my life in an orphanage. I was in an orphanage in Spokane. My birth mother gave me life and decided to go out to Spokane. So I was born there and then in the orphanage for 6 weeks or so, and then adopted by the Kaczor family. I'm very grateful for that. And we moved to Seattle. And so I was raised in Seattle and spent the first 18 years of my life basically in Seattle, went to school there. And I was baptized Catholic as a baby. And my mother was a huge positive influence on my faith because she was and is a person of very deep faith and deep prayer, and really is quite a role model for me of how to live a good life, a life of faith, a life of love for other people and service for other people. And so, yeah, I really looked to her as a model. And I was raised Catholic, and for me, you might say I've had many conversions, times where my faith really deepened and was changed in a positive way. And I guess for me, one of the main ways was when I was a kid starting to serve Mass in about fourth grade. And the guy who taught me how to serve Mass was a fifth grader, Mark Murray. And he, was teaching me, how to put on the alb and what to do. And so we put on the alb, and he said, "All right, well, walk out in front like it's a daily Mass." And so I walk out there, and he goes, "What the hell are you doing?" He said, you look like you're on a baseball field or something. Like this is church, this is Mass. You got to be very reverent and show a lot of respect. And this is fifth grader kind of upbraiding me for a lack of reverence on the altar. So anyway, I made a big impression because Mark was a super good basketball player and baseball player, and I looked up to him, an older kid. So I thought, oh, all right, this is serious. I better really, try my best. And so I did. I tried my best. And so basically, I have to say God has always been a part of my life. I haven't always been faithful to what God wants from me. Obviously, many times I've not lived out my Christian vocation the way I should. But I would say when I haven't lived it out, I felt that. I felt like I got to get back on track.
Sure.
So, yeah, I would say, my faith's been a big part of my life for a long time.
What did your parents do growing up in Seattle?
My mom is a homemaker, and my dad worked in commercial real estate.
Okay. And what was that like in Seattle? I know that's a somewhat a unique place in the United States. Has a lot of it's interesting geography, interesting climate. Any notable parts of that? Did you spend a lot of time outdoors?
Yeah, I think Seattle's super beautiful, actually. So it's obviously very rainy for a lot of the year, but in the summer, it is spectacularly beautiful because of all the rain. There's immense green, huge trees, which I love, and I spent a lot of time as a kid on the water, so sailing boats on lakes, and then sailing a bigger boat that my dad had on Puget Sound.
Yeah.
And yeah, I spent a ton of time outside. Love to play soccer. Love to ride my bike through trails in the woods. Love to go to camp. Went to and also worked at soccer camp for a number of years.
Okay.
So yeah, I love the Pacific Northwest. I just was up there this summer visiting with friends, and nothing better than the beautiful blue skies of Seattle in the summer, and if it's a beautiful day, of the trees lit up, and it's just spectacular. So I really like that, and I really miss that.
Yeah. Did you go to Catholic schools growing up?
I did. Yeah, I went to a Catholic grade school called Our Lady of Fatima, and then I went to a Catholic high school called Blanchette, and then I went to Boston College, a Jesuit school, and then I went to the University of Notre Dame.
Yeah. So that's a big move from high school in Seattle all the way across the country to Boston College. Tell us about that. What drew you there? Why there?
Well, for some reason, I wanted to move away from home for college. And it wasn't because I didn't like my friends in Seattle or didn't like my family. I didn't know. I just thought it was kind of an adventure to move away. So I applied to, the choice came down to between Santa Clara and Boston College. And basically, I asked a teacher about this. I said, I'm kind of debating whether to go to Santa Clara or Boston College. And she said, well, Boston College is a better school. And so I thought, all right, well, I guess it's a better school. So I went there. Um, and so that really is what drew me. It wasn't so, I wanted to get out of Seattle. And again, not because I dislike Seattle or dislike my friends or family, but just to kind of have an adventure, see something new, kind of just, experiences something different.
Right. And did you major in philosophy?
I did.
At
I majored in,
least?
yeah, I majored in philosophy. It wasn't my plan going in. I was undecided. And
Okay.
basically what happened was I was in the honors program and I took uh, a seminar where we read basically a whole bunch of ancient and medieval texts. So we read like Homer and we read Sophocles and we read Aristotle. And when we read Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, I was very struck by it, in
Yeah.
particular his treatment of friendship.
Hmm.
And when we read Augustine's Confessions, I was really struck by that. So those two works, the Nicomachean Ethics and the Confessions, really made a big impression on me.
Mhm.
And so, because those are both works in philosophy, I thought, well, it seems like I maybe should take some more philosophy. So then I took a course with a philosophy professor named Peter Kreeft.
Okay.
And he had been teaching at Boston College since 1965, and he's still teaching there now in 2025. So he's been teaching there for, I think, 60 years, if I'm
Wow.
adding that up correctly. And he was a great professor. He was really, I learned a ton from him. And I had Father Ron Tiselli, also a great philosophy professor. So basically, after taking his course and taking more courses, I ended up as a junior having to declare a major. And I already was close to being a philosophy major. And so I just declared philosophy. And that's what I ended up majoring in.
Wow. I didn't know the Peter Kreeft connection.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful thing. But unsurprised when you said BC, his name came up
That's right.
in the back of my head.
That's right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's a wonderful formative influence to have, and yeah, a legendary one for sure. Any particular memories of courses with him that stand out, or
Yeah. I remember very vividly the very first day of the first course I had with him. I was thinking about religion.
Mm,
And he walked in and he had chalk and he wrote on the board, either God exists or God does not exist. And he just kind of paused. And I thought, yeah, that seems right. Either God really does exist or there's no God. And then he said, either Jesus really is God or Jesus isn't.
mhm.
And I thought, yeah, that seems right too. Either he really is God or he's just a mere human being. And then he wrote, either the Catholic Church is the church Jesus founded or it's not. Yeah, okay. And then the rest of the course was thinking about, those dichotomies.
Right.
Does God exist? Is Jesus really God? Is the Catholic Church really the church Jesus founded?
Wow, that's great. Yeah, what a privilege.
Yeah.
Um, and did he and other professors encourage you to pursue your studies further? What was it that said, you know what, I need to go even beyond an undergraduate degree in philosophy? And
Yeah. You know, I don't recall exactly having conversations about it, but I do recall basically looking at his life and looking at the life of Father Ron Tiselli, who was a professor of philosophy there, who's a big influence, and basically thinking that's what I want to do. I thought this seems like a great life, right? You read books that you like, you talk to students, you write papers. I just thought this sounds like a fantastic way to live your life. So I definitely wanted to, become a professor. And basically, when I was an undergraduate, I kind of debated between becoming a philosophy professor and a theology professor. And so basically, as a senior, I applied to graduate schools, 10 different graduate schools of philosophy and theology. And I actually got into all of them. And
wow,
I chose Notre Dame because it was both the best school I got into and also the school that offered me the most financial aid. So It was a win-win.
Okay, yeah. Was there any consideration at that time about the priesthood or becoming a Jesuit or something like that?
I did think about that.
Yeah.
And I actually, before I met my wife, went on various vocational explorations. So they have these things like a come and see weekend, and you'd go visit the Jesuits or visit, different groups. And basically it was sort of interesting. So I visited the Legionaries of Christ,
Hmm.
and it was sort of like a military boot camp. They got up, I think, at 4 a.m, and I just thought, wow, I couldn't even get through the weekend hardly. I said, this is way too hard for me. Then I visited the Jesuits, and the Jesuits was sort of the opposite extreme. It was sort of like, well, we're going to have mass if you want to go. Yeah, you could go if you want. And it just seemed very, I don't know, lax and just not very engaged. And so it was sort of like too hot and too cold.
Hmm.
And I visited the Redemptorists, and the Redemptorist guy said, tell me about your theological views. And I said, well, I really think that the church's teaching on these controversial issues, I accept the church's teaching, and I think it's wise. And he goes, oh my gosh, you're like Joseph Ratzinger. He did not mean that as a compliment.
Okay.
So that didn't work out. I visited the Archdiocese of Seattle, and this is years ago, of course, but at that time they had a woman as the vocations director. So I went in there and had this interview with her. And, she said, well, why do you want to be a priest? And I said, well, I'd really love to be able to say mass and hear confessions, and, administering the sacraments would be just, really amazing. And she goes, well, priests have to do a lot of other things too. They have to, repave parking lots and replace the roof and this and that. And, I thought, well, yeah, I understand that's part of it, but I don't know how many men want to become priests because they want to repave parking lots and put new roofs on buildings or something. And, she said, well, do you do any volunteer work? And I said, yeah, I work on teaching CCD to children, and I also work right at this campus newspaper that's sort of evangelistic. And she goes, no, I mean real work, volunteer work, like homeless and stuff. Anyway, so I sat up, she sat down the whole interview. And then at the end, I said, well, how are vocations going here in Seattle? Things, moving in a positive direction? She goes, as long as Rome demands a celibate male, I see no end to the problem in sight. So I thought, okay, that's not going to work. So my point of relaying all these little anecdotes is just that I was like a guy who feels called to marriage, and then every girl I ask out says no. And if that happens to you, you know what? You're not called to marriage. Because if no girl will date you, you're definitely not called to get married to a woman. So,
Yeah.
so I felt like that way about my thoughts about the priesthood. Yeah, it seemed like to me that it would be a possibility, but every time I tried to do that, the door was slammed very firmly in my face. So I gave up on that.
And so you graduate Boston College, and so you're on the far West Coast, then you go to the far East Coast, and then finally you make it to the promised land, the Midwest.
Right.
What was it like going to Notre Dame? And did you meet your wife at Notre Dame? Is that
No, I met her in college.
Met her in college.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Correct. Yeah. Notre Dame was totally fantastic.
Mhm.
I had a great experience there. I had fantastic professors. Many of them are now deceased. So I had David Solomon for a class on virtue ethics. I had a bunch of classes with Stephen Gersh on Neoplatonism. My two most important teachers, though, were Alasdair MacIntyre, and I had a few classes with him, and then my dissertation director, Ralph McInerny. And I really feel that this was a golden age for Notre Dame, and a wonderful, wonderful experience. There were so many very fine scholars there, and I feel like I really got a great training and mentorship into philosophy. So it really is a wonderful time, and I look back on that time with great fondness. It was also a very hard time, though, because graduate school is quite demanding, and I was always worried about getting kicked out of graduate school and worried about not getting a job and stuff. But I suppose those worries gave me the energy to really focus and try my best, and it did work out. I did get my degree, and I was able to get a job.
Let's take a minute and then talk about each of those figures you mentioned by name, just because not everyone may know who they are, but there are very significant people. So let's start with David Solomon. Who is he, and what was he known for?
So David Solomon was a professor at Notre Dame. He first came to Notre Dame in 1968, and he was a Baylor graduate. And oh no, that's not true. That's not true. Baylor undergraduate, but graduate degree from Texas, if I remember correctly. And he was a kind of standard analytic philosopher, but he became very interested in virtue ethics through his friendship with Alasdair MacIntyre, because David Solomon spent some time at Boston University, and at that time, MacIntyre was also a professor there. And when he came to Notre Dame, he became very good friends with one of the other people I mentioned, Ralph McInerny. And David's focus on ethics kind of transformed from a kind of a standard analytic philosopher to more someone who was emphasizing virtue ethics. And he learned a lot about the Catholic intellectual tradition and palled around with a lot of the Catholics. But he never became Catholic. He went for years and years and was known on campus as a great advocate of the Catholic intellectual tradition. He founded what's now called the De Nicola Center for Ethics and Culture, which has an unbelievably powerful and important influence on many students at Notre Dame. So he did fantastic work. And then late in life, a year before he died, he became Catholic. And so his conversion brought a great deal of joy to many people. And I wrote an essay online about his conversion to Catholicism. So he was a fantastic, fantastic person.
And the second fellow you mentioned was, you said Stephen
Gersh, yeah.
Gersh.
So Stephen Gersh is a British professor, he's now retired, who taught Platonism and Neoplatonism in the Medieval Institute at Notre Dame for many years.
Okay.
So I had many courses with Stephen Gersh that focused on Neoplatonic thought, but also he was a professor of Latin, so I studied Latin with him also. And very supportive, very helpful, a very dry British wit, and yeah, a great influence.
And Platonism and Neoplatonism, sometimes undercovered or understudied in a way in the history of philosophy.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah.
The next person you mentioned is Alasdair MacIntyre. Tell us a little bit about him. I know he's been. We've talked, and you're teaching a class on him.
I am
this coming semester.
Yeah, I'm teaching a class on MacIntyre this coming semester. So for those who don't know who MacIntyre was, he just died this year in May, and he was a really provocative and prolific moral philosopher who died at 96 years old and worked as a philosopher for more than 70 years. He started writing philosophy when he was only 22 years old, professional articles in philosophy, and then gave his last public lecture at 93 years old. So he had this huge 70-year career of doing philosophy, and he was known in part for his sort of pilgrim progress through many different views. He physically changed location and taught at something like 15 or 20 different universities. So he would be at a place for 4 or 5, 6 years and then switch. But also he switched through lots of different views. So he was someone who was an atheist and then became a Catholic, someone who embraced Marxism and then rejected Marxism, someone who went through all sorts of philosophical developments over the years.
Yeah.
And he's most famous for his work After Virtue, which basically put virtue ethics on the map as an alternative to Kantian duty-based ethics and utilitarian consequence-based ethics. So he was really a quite formidable figure, very intimidating, unbelievably intelligent, unbelievably well-read, and yeah, a very important figure for me, both as a teacher and as a exemplar of how to be a philosopher.
Do you recall particularly the subject of the courses you had with him?
Yeah, I had 2 classes with him. I had a course on 20th century ethics, in which we basically looked at the major texts of especially early 20th century ethics.
And that would have been not only his sort of bread and butter, but also what his life's work is engaging in a deep way. Yeah.
Yes, correct. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other course I had with him was on practical rationality. So that course was more or less what he talked about in his book, Whose Justice, Which Rationality? So both these courses were quite very, very challenging. He was an extremely hard grader.
Okay.
And on the first day of class, he came in and said, if you want an A in this class, you have to write a paper I put my own name on.
Okay.
And if you want an A minus, it has to be a paper I'd almost put my name on. So the standards were extremely high. And so I wrote my first paper in my first class with him, and it came back with a grade that I'd never received before.
Okay, I won't ask you to reveal what it was.
Yeah, and it was a grade not only had I never received it before, I'd never seen before.
Wow.
It was B minus.
Okay.
2 minuses, exactly.
Two minuses.
Which I suppose is better than a C++, but still, I mean, but my grades for McIntyre improved, and eventually they improved so much that I thought, well, I'm going to ask him for a letter of recommendation. And this took real courage because my friend asked him for a letter of recommendation, and McIntyre told my friend, I certainly can write you a letter of recommendation, but it's the kind of letter that keeps you from getting a job.
Okay.
So anyway, Alasdair's letter of recommendation for me did not keep me from getting my job at Loyola Marymount.
Good. Finally, the last philosopher you mentioned is Ralph McInerny, who was your dissertation director. Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Ralph McInerny is really my model of not just how to be a philosopher, but really how to be human. He was a unbelievably prolific philosopher, and he wrote not just philosophy, but he also wrote mystery novels.
Right.
And he wrote in the course of his life more than 100 books.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really quite amazing. And he even had some of his murder mysteries made into a television series. Right?
Okay.
There's a Father Dowling murder mysteries are based on these. There's a TV show that was prominent in the 80s and 90s. Were made into, are based on his novels.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really take Ralph as a model. I've had a lot of trouble, though, despite my best efforts. My book, Proportionalism and the Natural Law Tradition, has not yet been picked up for television. I've been working on it, and I've hired an agent, but somehow it's not come to fruition. But he was a fantastic philosopher, a fantastic writer, but more importantly, a fantastic person. Married for more than 50 years, 7 kids, really devoted person to his family, devoted teacher for his students, just courteous, witty, generous, hardworking. I mean, he was a fantastic person, and I feel unbelievably lucky that he was one of my teachers.
Yeah. Yeah. I've read a few Ralph McInerny books. No mystery novels, but some of his philosophical works, and a great sense of humor.
That's right. That's right.
And a great writer, as you said, and really one of the preeminent Thomistic, maybe one of the preeminent Thomistic philosophers of the 20th century.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's totally right. And McIntyre thought the same thing. In one of his lectures, McIntyre said that the most important person to have ever taught philosophy at the University of Notre Dame was Ralph McInerny. So, according to McIntyre, McInerny was the most important.
Wow. Yeah, so a real gift to be able to have all of those.
Oh, yeah. That's why I say, when I look back on this was like, and in fact, this phrase, the golden age, that is something that other students said to me, because I met these students at this philosophy conference meeting, and they were from Notre Dame. And they said, well, when were you there? And I said, oh, I was there during this time and had these teachers. And he goes, and then the student said, oh, that was the golden age. Yeah. And I feel it was. I just feel, wow, you couldn't get kind of academic training today like I had. I mean, it's not available. Yeah. These people are all dead or retired, or both.
So you leave Boston College and you come to Notre Dame and you study philosophy. Did you know going in you wanted to focus on ethical matters or moral philosophy in particular? Or was that something that developed after an encounter with Alasdair MacIntyre and Ralph McInerny, both of whom maybe had as their preeminent interests ethical things? Was it those influences that drew you into that particular domain of philosophy, or something else?
I guess I didn't really think it through very much. I basically took courses that I thought were interesting and took courses with professors that had good reputations. And so I don't think I was super intentional, like this is exactly what I want to do. And in fact, my initial plan in going to Notre Dame was to do work on Dante's Divine Comedy, because I thought, well, it'd be interesting to gonna, have that as a focus. And I still am interested in Dante's Divine Comedy, and I have taught it many times. But I'm not exactly sure why I was drawn to moral philosophy, other than to say, I guess it was an interest that predates going to Notre Dame. Because I do remember debating issues of bioethics while in college. And I do remember having an interest in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics in college. So I guess already at that point, it was sort of an interest. But I have to say, it wasn't a conscious thing like, I'm going to Notre Dame, I want to study moral philosophy. That's not, I wasn't thinking in that way.
So you graduate at Notre Dame, you get the letter of recommendation from Alasdair MacIntyre, and you immediately go to Loyola Marymount?
No, I went as a von Humboldt fellow to Germany and
Okay.
to the University of Cologne. So I spent a year there, and I basically revised my doctoral dissertation there. Then I spent a year at Loyola New Orleans, and then I went to Loyola Marymount.
Okay. Any highlights from the time in Germany or the time in New Orleans?
Lots of highlights. I mean, both those years were fantastic. I loved being in Germany, and I went to Germany not knowing hardly any German at all. And then basically in the year, one of my goals was to really develop my German a lot. So basically every day I would translate a lot of German and speak to German speakers. And at the end, I was able to give talks in German. So
Oh, nice.
it really was a great year. Made lots of friends, traveled around Europe with my family. Yeah, it was fantastic. It was a great year. And then New Orleans was great too. Lots of fantastic people there. Wonderful food. My colleagues in philosophy were really kind to me and helped me as a young professor to move forward. So I have lots of fun memories of that year too.
So how many years now has it been that you've been teaching at Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles?
I've been teaching there since 1998,
Since 1998. Okay.
more than
And
25 years.
yeah. And what courses do you primarily teach? Primarily undergraduates and
I teach undergraduates and graduates.
Okay.
I'd say my most common courses are for advanced undergraduates, so juniors and seniors. And the two courses I've taught the most are a course called The God of Faith and Reason and another course called The Ethics of Love and Marriage.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. Which course do the students like more?
I think they really like both. That's why I keep teaching these courses because they really like it. I think the ethics of love and marriage that they probably like more. And part of the reason for that is that obviously, if you're in college thinking about love, happiness, marriage, whatever, these are topics that most students are very interested in. And then the course talks about lots of controversial issues. So we talk about sex outside of marriage and polygamy and contraception and divorce, and we talk about all kinds of controversial issues. So the students have a lot of interest in debating and discussing things. And my classes are very much zones of free speech. So there's some professors that are very dogmatic and be like, well, you have to agree with me, and if you don't, I'm going to absolutely, punch you in the face and give you an F and whatever. And in my courses, I always say in the first day, you are free in this course. You're free to agree or disagree with things we read. You're free to agree or disagree with fellow students. You're free to agree or disagree with me. Your grade is not going to be put down just because you disagree with whatever, or you agree with whatever. So I really encourage them to think about these things and discuss these things. And then I ask them questions and have them discuss it and say, okay, well, what did you come up with in your group for whatever question I asked? So I try to have the course be open to different perspectives and a course in which the students can really discuss things in a civil and constructive way.
Yeah. Just relatively recently, in the last few years, you've taken on a role with Bishop Barham's Word on Fire. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I've been working with Word on Fire for a number of years. Basically, I write 2 articles a month for them, and the articles basically can be about anything I want. And so I've written about Alasdair MacIntyre, an essay after he died, remembering Alasdair MacIntyre. And I've written about questions like, how much can I drink before it's a mortal sin?
Sure.
And so I basically write about all kinds of things. And it's a great outlet to be able to, regularly produce work. And then in addition to that, I also sometimes record videos for Word on Fire or have online seminars for Word on Fire. So it's been really great to be able to collaborate with Bishop Barron. He's such a great person, and I'm really indebted to him for founding Word on Fire, for inviting me to participate with him. And I have a book that just came out called Is Belief Believable? And Bishop Barron wrote the foreword for the book for me.
Nice.
So very, very kind of him. And he's really a very generous person. And it all started because of a friendship that I developed with him. When he moved to Los Angeles as auxiliary bishop, we have a mutual friend named Matt Levering. And I asked Matt, hey, I'd love to meet him. And so Matt introduced us by email. And then we started just to hang out in a social way, like go to movies together or go to have dinner or whatever. And so, yeah, we did that for a number of years, and it was just very fun social occasion. But then he invited me to, write these essays and stuff. So that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah. So here's the question everybody really wants to know is, what is the best movie you saw with Bishop Barron?
That's a good question. What is the best movie I saw with Bishop Barron? I'm not sure I have a good answer for that. I think maybe there's a movie called The Case for Christ that we watched together, which was interesting. It is the story of this guy's conversion, and so I think maybe that was the movie that I enjoyed the most.
Okay, yeah, that's based on a book, right?
That's right. That's right.
Which I think is kind of keeps having comebacks.
That's right.
Kind of is
Yes.
Perennially popular.
Yeah, Lee Strobel's book. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good. Well, you mentioned this book, Is Belief Believable? Is that the most recent? It's coming out soon, or it's already out?
It is out. It came out yesterday.
Oh, it came out yesterday.
Yes.
Okay. And where can people find that?
I think where books are sold. I hope where books are sold. Yeah.
Okay.
So online, people can get it. If in Catholic bookstores, I think they can get it. Yeah, the book is actually basically talking about three different issues. So the first is to try to remove obstacles to belief. So it's to challenge religious skepticism, to challenge the idea that, we can't know anything about God, or we can't know anything about anything. So it's sort of challenging skepticism to religious claims. And the second part of the book is looking at arguments for God's existence. So what can we know? How can we know about God? So I look at arguments from Aquinas, but also argument from Augustine and an argument from Islamic thinkers called the Kalam cosmological argument. And then in the third part of the book, I consider what we can know about God through reasoning. What can we know about God's intelligence? What can we know about God's will? What can we know about God as love? And then at the very end of the book, I look at some contemporary takes on the Bible, and I get into a discussion with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson about how to read the Bible and how to think about biblical stories.
Interesting. Well, yeah, that's something that's always needed is sort of fresh pathways in for people to ask some of those most basic questions.
Yeah,
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That book is out.
It's out.
Your part of it is sort of done. It's now up to the readers.
It was exactly. Yeah.
What's next? What's next for you? Is there already another book in the works? Is there? You're teaching this class on Alasdair MacIntyre. Is there anything? Is there any kind of philosophical subject that you're like, I've been wanting to tackle this, and I've just never got the opportunity? Well,
I do have another book that I just sent off to a press. So we'll see whether
you're a prolific author.
Yeah. Well, we'll see whether they like it. But the book I sent off to the press, and we'll see if they like it, is called Vital Conflicts: Debating Dobbs, Gender Treatments, and Claims of Conscience. And so it's basically looking at the reaction to the abortion decision Dobbs, the reassessment of the abortion issue, and then looking at the controversy about treatments for gender dysphoria, in particular treatments for young people with gender dysphoria. And then the final part of that book is looking at healthcare professionals and their rights of conscience. So you could imagine a Catholic healthcare professional who's working in a hospital, and the hospital wants the healthcare professional to do euthanasia. Well, should the Catholic be forced to do that, or is there a right of conscientious objection? So that book looks at those issues, and that's I've finished my part, but I'm waiting to hear from the press whether they like it. So we'll see.
Is that a more academic book or a more popular book, or somewhere in between?
I'd say it's somewhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for your contributions to the ECT and for your generosity in coming here and filming with us today. I know our readers will benefit greatly from your article. I was reading it, and it took me back to just being interested in philosophy for the first time, and answering some of those questions. Ethics is often that entry point for philosophy, generally, and so thank you very much, and we'll let you go and have some rest after a long day of filming.
Fantastic. Well, good. Thank you. It's a real
Yeah.
pleasure to get to meet you and a pleasure to speak with you today and do the filming. So I'm really grateful for all the work you do and hope it goes very well for you.
Thank you.